with TMYS and was okay. Sorry, ma'am. I need
Yeah,
to.
we're
We
live.
will
No, we're
start
live.
this live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaishree Chouhan. I am a senior research fellow in the Department of English, University of Rajasthan. I welcome you to the TMYS Review Project series on working women. TMYS Review December 2025 will explore the theme of working women in literature. We are calling for the submissions of essays, poems, interviews, and short stories under the project. To know more about the submission guidelines and the project architecture, please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. This evening, I consider myself very privileged to be in the company of our esteemed panelist, none other than Dr. Somrita Ganguly. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, ma'am, because I get tight tongue when it comes to Bengali names. So, who will shortly share her views with us, insights with us. The topic for today's discussion is women professional in publishing industry, navigating the digital transformation. We will try to understand how women professionals in publishing industry, where there are authors, editor, anthologists, are adapting to the challenges and opportunities thrown by the new medias and transcending in their working fields in terms of their cultural stations and professional positioning. Before I begin, this is a very formal introduction of our guest speaker today, Dr. Somrita Ganguly. Dr. Ganguly is a professor, poet, and literary translator, a Fulbright doctoral research fellow at Brown University, and alumna of UEA's Literary Translation Summer School. She has judged the Pan American Translation Prize, Kamala Das Poetry Awards, and served as an expert reader for several prestigious translation grants. She has collaborated with Room to Read and the National Center for Writing and received Fulbright Hayes grant. Her work has featured globally, including the London Book Fair. She has lectured at top universities. Her publishing publications include Quesadilla and Other Adventures, Three Stories, and Nights at Calcutta Cafe. Um, After this introduction, ma'am, over to you. I'll give this panel to you. Please share your views with us.
Thank you so much, Jaishree, for thinking of me for this panel. I hope we can have a conversation that throws light on where we are right now in 2025. It's a very interesting moment in history with the digital boom and especially the OpenAI boom. We'll get into that in just a bit. But before that, I want to take this opportunity to thank my very dear friend Coral and the TMYS family for doing the work that you guys have been consistently doing. And, we're talking about digital transformation today. TMYS is actually a part of that transformation because with Coral, with TMYS, we started the writing program as well during COVID, a point in time where people did not have access to too many physical spaces. And we were looking for ways in which we can get people together um, without losing out on some of the intimacy that physical spaces provide for writers. Uh, so we navigated, we thought through those challenges. We thought through some of the opportunities that can come to us through the digital media. And that's how we were able to come up with the writing program, which really kicked off in the middle of COVID, which showed us what a boon digital technology can really be. So thank you to everybody that is a part of TMYS and you, Jaishree, especially for this project and for thinking of me. Um,
It's an honor,
as
ma'am.
I was telling you earlier, it's like coming back home. Anything to do with TMYS, these conversations, they feel like coming back home because, that's the thing with writers. We tend to really stay in isolated cocoons, and then any such opportunity really gets us back into a more social setup. And it gets me personally, I can speak for myself, it gets me thinking about a lot of things, which is how I was planning on how to start this today's conversation early in the day. And I thought, let's begin with drawing this distinction between AI and digital transformation, right? Because if you think just of digital technology, that existed, that is not new, and it came with both pros and cons. Let's talk about the pros first, right? For the last 10 years, if you look at the publishing industry in India, um, the digital transformation has really been remarkable, especially for women in writing. If you look at it from a non gendered perspective first, you'll realize that with the advent of digital spaces, digital journals, and blogs, and microblogging platforms, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all these spaces where people started sharing their art, you will realize that the process of publishing became truly democratic. Yeah. Earlier, there were a lot of checkpoints, a lot of gatekeepers. Traditional publishing was difficult to access, and especially for poetry. I'm speaking at this point in time as a poet because that is harder to, or was harder to get out to people. And even if you look at this perspective from India today, there are very few publishers that are publishing poetry in India right now in English. Mm, the traditional big five are shying away from poetry, mostly. The indie presses have either exhausted all their resources publishing poets over the last few years, or you have, um, people who are, for various reasons, we might get into that later. For various reasons, it's given birth to a sort of predatory vanity publishing culture when it comes to poetry. There really are very, very few publishers at this point in time that are picking up an anthology of poems and saying, I'm going to champion it, I'm going to support it. And the rationale behind it, I've been told, is that people aren't reading poetry enough. As a poet, I partially agree and partially disagree. I think we're in a moment when we have more poets than readers of poetry. That is a fact. So I think we have to change our reading culture a little bit as well. But that said and done, what I was saying is that the traditional space for poetry had become very, very narrow. And then with digital technology available to people, there was a sudden boom. So we no longer had to rely on traditional publishers or independent presses to get that book out. Yeah, we could be blogging it on our social media. We could be reading the poems and putting it out on YouTube as an audio, as a video. So really, it became very democratic, the process of publishing. And if you go into it, you will see people like Rupi Kaur. I have my differences with her kind of poetry, but I will not take away from the fact that she was a part of this transformation. Yeah, that's how she had started. I might or might not like her poems because, we all have personal preferences. Somebody likes T.S. Eliot, somebody likes Barrett Browning. We've got our personal tastes. So not going into that, whether I approve of her poetry or not, whether I like reading it or not, that's a part of a different conversation. But she was really a product of this process. And then she got picked up by a traditional publisher, and Milk and Honey came out. But she started through a microblogging platform. So really, the process became very democratic. And there were lots of people who said, we now have the space and the confidence to start our own journal, our own blog, our own online magazine, our own online review platform, right? So, really, that was like a movement. Um, a lot more voices came to the forefront, voices that were earlier marginalized, people that earlier did not have access to any of these traditional platforms said, I don't need to wait to get past these gatekeepers. I can put it out there on social media or through the digital technology and get my voice out. Um, for women in particular, as a woman, I think that was extremely liberating and empowering because you will realize that historically, and I like to call this the process. I mean, if you look at the history of writers, we really have a lot of badly behaved men in publishing who have created unsafe spaces for women, starting all the way back from Chaucer. I actually learned about Chaucer's misdeeds a couple of nights ago. Shout out to one of my colleagues who found this out in a book and then verified it and then told me this. We did not realize that Chaucer would also fall in the same bracket, but apparently he does. Look at the greats. I could talk about some of the people that I thought changed my life through their poetry because I hadn't read anything that powerful or transformative before. There's a Pablo Neruda, there's a Derek Walcott, there's a T.S. Eliot. All of them have a history of being really badly behaved. And therefore, the publishing space became somewhat dangerous. And I'm talking only about uh, people that have been named, that have been called out. So you can only imagine how many have not been called out, how many have not been named, and how dangerous this space is then for women. These are also, some of these people who have been named, like all the way from Pablo Picasso to Pablo Neruda, everybody in between, before and after. Um, their transgressions were truly gut wrenching, which is why people started talking about it. But shamefully, woefully, and dangerously, there are smaller transgressions that people think you shouldn't be talking about too loud because then, as a woman, you're overreacting, you're mad, you're crazy, you're gaslit into believing that this was not how things were meant, this was not how things had happened. So, going back to what I was talking about, the publishing space started getting very, very difficult for women. If you think about somebody like Kamala Das, um, she too had to, really struggle to find her way, had to, and not poetically, she was already there, but to find her way in the publishing scene. Yeah, she had to really scream her words out before the men who dictated this industry of the Indian publishing circle at that point in time took her seriously. And even today in 2025, I've heard critics say things like, yeah, but what is so great, what is so exciting about Kamala Das? She was just titillating her audience. She was just writing very licentious kind of poetry. Where is the depth in her voice? So I mean, I'm sure if she were here, if she were alive today, she would have responded to these people through her verses. But because she's not, I think we, as daughters of Kamala Das, as daughters of Eunice D'Souza, have to keep speaking on their behalf, right? So in times when the publishing space got so difficult for women, digital technology really brought about a transformation as well, right? Because now you don't have to negotiate with a badly behaved male publisher or a badly behaved male editor or 10 different male writers who might be inviting you to poetry reading addas and gatherings where you feel unsafe. Because now you could be publishing from the safety of your own home. So, for women in particular, I thought this was fantastic, the opportunity that it brought for women. That you did not have to put yourself in any sort of unsafe, dangerous territory. And this is something that Coral and I have been talking about. A few of my female colleagues in the industry have been talking about. Someday we will hopefully be able to come up with a publishing house by women, for women, and for voices from the margins where we can create a safe space. But until that happens, we too rely on technology to get these voices out, including our own, right? Um, but then obviously with every good thing there will be people misusing it, there will be disadvantages. For instance, we realized, something that we joked about a little earlier, that there are very many poets in today's world, not too many people reading poetry, right? So with this sort of digital democratization, everybody thought that I am a poet, and I don't want to I don't want to discourage them in any which way, but instead, I would like to encourage them to study poetry as well. If this is your medium of expression, maybe if you studied it, it would shine through. Poetry is one of those things that I think would shine through. Borrowing from T.S. Eliot's essay again, Tradition and Individual Talent. Um, so if you look at it, it birthed way too many poets and not very many readers. We started getting impatient. We started falling prey to the, double tap heart culture. You might not even be reading what the person has written, but you've hearted it because maybe this is a friend, or this is a colleague, or this is somebody that you have followed, or this is somebody who you would like to notice you. Um, so there is that. And then there is obviously the other problem of um, this is the paradox of not having any gatekeeper at all. The thing with a good editor is that they can really take your work from a 60% to a 90% through editorial intervention, right? Because very often, as writers, we are unable to look at our works from a critical distance. We are unable to look at our work objectively. We aren't able to, kill our darlings, as they say, which an editor can. And an experienced editor, a good editor, somebody who has an eye for detail, somebody who's passionate about your voice and your project, uh, can really help you sharpen that work. But with the democratization of the platform through digital media, we saw that taking a backseat. Yeah. And we fell into this culture of, a very self congratulatory culture that social media has brought about, where people are very shy or very hesitant or very afraid or very ashamed or very guilty to comment on a work critically. And it goes both ways. Social media generated narcissism also has taken the humility away from the writer to be open to criticism, right? It goes both ways. It's not just the reader and the critic, it's also the writer. You have to be open to constructive suggestions and criticism. So a little bit of that, I think, went missing when all of those points, those checkpoints got erased. And it was just you, the keyboard, and the screen with no intervention. Um, if I could take a step back here and bring in an example from Wordsworth. So, when Wordsworth talked about poetry, he defined poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. But the same person in another poem describes poetry as emotions recollected in tranquility. He writes that in Daffodils. So, which is it then? Is poetry spontaneous? Is it an overflow? Or is it something that you have sat over, that you've brooded over, that has brewed within you for days or weeks or months or years before it takes shape? Right? And it seems that Wordsworth wasn't contradicting himself with these two positions. That poetry really is, in my opinion, the journey from being spontaneous and a powerful overflow to the journey of being emotions recollected in tranquility. So you start from here, you start from a space of overflowing, and then slowly you let that poem brew and grow and brew and grow like tea. You need to know just how long you should let it seep in water and just what the temperature of the water should be before you drink it, before you serve it. A poem too takes shape like that, and that is emotions recollected in tranquility. But when you have no checkpoints and it's just the keyboard and the screen and you, most of what we were getting online was the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. And there is no harm in expressing spontaneously, in expressing feelings that you can no longer contain within you, in expressing feelings that are bursting out of you. But there is also no moderation, there is no editing. There is no tempering of the process. The meat is raw, it has not been cooked. So, while it opened up spaces, these spaces were also left entirely unchecked initially when it started. Obviously, things are changing with that, right? Because as I said, there are a lot of people who have now taken it on themselves to bypass the traditional format of publishing, and they have said, hey, I will continue with my journal, but it's not going to be a print edition, it's going to be an online edition. So you have a group of editors there. With online poetry anthologies as well, there will be an editor, a couple of editors. So things are changing again with people coming back and taking on serious editorial roles and also being able to bypass some of the pitfalls of traditional publishing, right? But where we are today is a little different from where we started because we're living in the times of open AI. And I think that distinction needs to be drawn that, yes, of course, AI is a part of the digital transformative process, but it is not exactly the same as having access to a digital space, which is what was happening earlier. With AI, things are, which is why I said it's a very, very interesting moment in history that we are living in. Again, especially as a woman, I think AI can be very, very empowering for women. And I'll tell you why. I was in class a couple of days ago. We were studying The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope. And among other things, several of my female students volunteered and shared information about how they have been eve-teased or catcalled or harassed on public transport on their way to the college. And I said, you know what? 5 years down the line, if we could have AI and if I could just send you my recordings of my lectures, or if we could have a classroom together online, which we have experimented with initially during COVID, but if we can take it to a more refined space, I would not want you to put yourself in those danger zones. And I would not want you to travel um, in these unsafe ways and come to the college. We will be able to create an alternate college or an alternate education system. AI can be very, very helpful and freeing for women. I want AI in the kitchen. I want AI to do my cooking. I want AI to scrub my bathroom floors. I want AI to do my laundry. All the things that women are trapped by, all of these daily chores that weigh so heavy on us, constantly taking time away from meditating and reading and writing. I want AI to come and intervene there. Unfortunately, what has happened, uh, possibly because we haven't had too much female intervention in this field yet, but I think it's coming, is that we are using AI for things that really human beings should have been doing. For instance, I'm getting AI to write me a song, and I'm getting AI to give me, you know, the outline of a short story after I've given it a basic skeletal plot. And AI is writing me a poem. And maybe as a poet, you could call this highbrow, you could call this elitist. I don't like the poetry that AI is writing, especially the kind where, my prompt is very basic, because that is also, your prompt will also determine what the response is like. Um, so where I've given a basic prompt, I don't like the output that I'm getting. So I personally think AI is not there yet, that AI is not writing the poem that I would have written. It's only trying to simulate, it's only trying to mimic. There is no guarantee that it won't be able to get to a space in the next 5 or 10 years where it will actually be producing a poem that you cannot tell apart from, let's say, my poem, or a Sylvia Plath, or a Kamala Das. And that is dangerous. That is dangerous because this poem, no matter how good in terms of craft, no matter how good in terms of structuring, will still be mimetic. Because what AI does not have is a consciousness. So, what it is going to do is it is going to study and study and study and study a lot of data, reams of data, and perfect the craft. It is not going to be able to empathize, sympathize, or express the way in which you would have done. In other words, it is not going to bring you the kind of catharsis that actually writing down your own poem would have brought you. Because what you're doing in that case is, you're it's like bloodletting, which is what catharsis meant back in the, Aristotle borrowed the term from Greek medicine. That's also actually a very interesting story where, catharsis actually, so it was a medical practice where back in the classical times, it is said that if a person was unwell, you didn't have doctors back then. I think they were called physicians. The physician would come in and, slit open a vein, and they believed that the impure blood would flow out of your body, and along with it, the disease causing germs, bacteria, virus would also flow out, and the person would get cured. So Aristotle borrows this term from medicine, from practical life, and applies it to tragedy or the arts overall, right? That it is able to purge you, purify you, cleanse you of overwhelming emotions. Literature or art, good art. So when you're writing that poem, or you're writing that story, or you're writing that novel, no matter how hard you try to disguise the autobiographical elements in it, it is still a process of bloodletting for you. The ink is blue instead of red, but it brings you therapy. It brings you healing. It brings you catharsis. It cleanses you of certain emotions. Um, I don't think AI can do that because it is not right. It is writing from its, I mean, I can't even say it's writing from its perspective. It does not have a perspective of its own. It is simulating empathy. It is simulating sympathy. It is simulating emotions. It is imitative. It is mimetic. It is not original. It is not creating, which is why I think we are in a very, right now, a very interesting moment in history where we should determine what direction we want this facility to go in. Because what is AI? It is science. And science, really, at the end of the day, is just a tool in the hands of people. How you use it will determine what direction it will go in. Science can produce a drug for curing cancer. Science can also give birth to H1 bombs that will cause cancer. So it really depends on the user. It's a tool in the hands of people. And so we have to decide for ourselves what direction we want AI to go in. As I said, I am not somebody that wants to fight AI. When I see a good thing, I realize that it has advantages, and I want to be able to enjoy those advantages. I want AI in my kitchen. I don't want to be scrubbing dirty laundry. I want to be reading a novel. I don't want to be cooking breakfast and lunch and dinner. I want to be writing. So I want AI in the kitchen. I want AI in the bathroom. I want AI helping us out doing the daily mundane chores that we are not meant to do, really. Or even if we are meant to do that, we are not meant to waste our entire lives doing. I wanted to take care of that part while I am able to go and walk on some grass and breathe in some fresh air and get some sunlight on my skin and read and write and engage more creatively. So, um, yeah, I overshot the time? Wait, where is the clock? Okay, no, we're still there. Um, yeah, no, Jaishree, you take over. We can keep. I think it'll be better if it's not a monologue and a conversation. Yeah, those were my
No, no,
opening.
perfectly fine. I was so immersed in what we were saying. From you, kind of made me travel from Aristotle to all traditions of literary criticism that we have been
Mm,
doing as literary students. And
yeah.
while you were speaking about all these names and the particular thoughts, and I could also realize and that how much good literary criticism is still needed and is
Mm, mm,
required for the time, or somehow the art is, we're losing the art. That is what is my opinion. In today's time we are
mm,
losing the art of good criticism, because any writer, for instance T.S. Eliot or S.T. Coleridge or Wordsworth, when they were writing, they were simultaneously criticizing their work, writing about the entire genre of their writing and entire historical time being where they were writing. So they were totally aware of their creative process, and that is what we are losing in these times. That
yeah.
is we totally required. And thank you ma'am for pointing out all these things and provoking these thoughts. I'm sure whoever is watching this particular episode, they are all thinking on the same line. So thank you. And again, I was so immersed that I also forgot that we are over the time or we are within time. So but but quickly, the beauty of having you give us your total time is that I can ask you as many questions as I want, though I will not. I'll ask you 3 questions only. So because we have time, the first question will be, ma'am, to you is, with an impressive academic record of yours, being a professor, an author, simultaneously you must have a thorough experience of such two distinctive professional fields, academic and writing, in terms of their functioning and creative outcomes. If we talk about creative writing and professionally teaching in an academic setting or academic writing, we wish to ask you how distinctive is actually the publishing process for those both fields, and what has been this transition for you like? Please share.
Um, Thanks, Jashi, for that question. I'm not sure if I have entirely been able to transition from one zone to the other. I'm still dabbling both, which I've been told is dangerous. Um, One of my friends, who's a film critic, says that if you're a very good film critic, you will never be a great filmmaker. And I try to apply that to my own field, and I end up worrying that if you're a very good critic, you might not be a very creative person. We'll see how that turns out in the future. Um, so I don't think I've made that transition entirely. I think I'm still sort of navigating the challenges and the opportunities in both fields. A writer is who I want to be, is who I identify as, is who I am. Um, Teaching is what I do. In my head, at least, that distinction is very clear. Um, that is my job, that is my profession, and writing is my calling. As far as the publishing space goes, I think some of the challenges that I mentioned at the beginning, especially for women, remain the same in both the fields, because very often these fields are manned by men, and it becomes very, very dangerous for women to publish in academia. The dangers also go beyond publishing. The dangers creep into the classroom, the dangers creep into your process of research. Depends on who your supervisor is, what your supervisor wants of you, how ethical this person is. You have to cross a lot of those barriers before you get to the publishing point. And once you get there, the challenges are similar to that of publishing poetry. Academic writing, as you know, is also very niche, like poetry. Not too many people are reading it. I don't want to break your heart, Jaishree. You're doing a PhD right now. There will probably be 5 people who will read your thesis while it is in the thesis form, which is why my PhD advisors, two very, very important people as far as my academic career is concerned, I was always discussing with them the advantages and disadvantages of breaking free from this, this academic jargon that we tie ourselves up to, that we limit ourselves with, frankly, that I personally feel if our writing is a little more accessible and not buried under jargon, there might be a few more people reading it. Um, so anyway, that was an aside, that was a digression. So the challenges are similar. Mm, and the advantages also, I think, both poetry and academic publishing, I think both these areas, they've really tapped into the digital technology, right? Because right now you don't necessarily only have to publish in print journals. There is the UGC care list, which keeps getting updated and revised, I think, every 6 months or so. So it's difficult to keep track of it. But yeah, there is a list somewhere, and we are tied to that list somehow. Um, and you will see that, jokes aside, you will see that a lot of the journals on that list are digital journals. Yeah, they are not necessarily print journals. Advantages we've all figured out by now, including basic advantages like being able to accommodate more write ups, because I'm not fixed by the number of pages that I can publish in hard format. I'm not fixed by whether it's a soft copy or a hard copy. I'm not fixed by or limited by what the cost of this journal or this book is going to be, or this anthology or this edited volume is going to be. And if you look at edited volumes that are coming out now, Routledge, OUP, Sage, the serious academic publishing houses, a lot of it is very, very inaccessible to people in India. Because really, if your semester fee is 2,000 rupees, for instance, in a semester fee, yeah, as a PhD student in a state funded or a centrally funded, publicly funded university, and the book costs 2,500 rupees, you're not buying it. You're asking somebody to scan the essay that you need, or you're going to platforms that I will not mention publicly, and you're, getting hold of these books. So, with digital technology, I think you can bypass that challenge. You can obviously especially with open access platforms, you don't have to give in to piracy. Again, not going into the pros and cons of piracy, etc. I mean, that's the thing of another another discussion, another talk. But sitting in India, it's a little rich to say that no student should no student should read pirated books. I mean, come on. I mean, every time you photocopy an entire book, that's also a form of piracy, right? Anyway, it's too rich to sit in India and say students should not be doing it, because look at our education system. Look at how much money we're putting into our budget for education. look at the cross section of our society, look at how many people have access to education at all, higher education, right? All of that aside. So with digital platforms, more people are getting to publish. But again, as I mentioned with poetry earlier, there is this huge culture of predatory publishing that has come up, right? And this I can mention with um, with a lot of honesty. I was going to say pride, and then I swallowed the word. It's not pride. It comes from a place of integrity and honesty. I have not, and I strongly, strongly recommend all my students to not pay and publish, because this is your intellectual labor and property. If anything, you should be paid for that hard work. You shouldn't be paying others to publish it, right? So I do not publish. I do not go for conferences where you have to pay a hefty fee, because then why are you organizing the conference at all? Who is it for? Is it only for your NAC accreditation, or is it really going to be a serious engagement? So the works that I have edited obviously have, not only have I not charged a fee for it, but we also do the basics like giving people a royalty, no matter how small that sum is. The other myth that I have to break, everybody probably already knows it, but it's good to reiterate: there is very little money in publishing, whether that's academic or non-academic. So yeah, whatever little royalty that is, 10 rupee, 5 rupee, 25 rupee, obviously I make sure that goes to the person who deserves it. I've also been at the receiving end of it from many people who are honest, and I've also been at the other end of it, and that's how I've learned my lesson, and I've decided to never fall into that trap again. If I organize a conference, I make sure that the person who's coming gets their dues. Anyway, all of these are digressions. To go back to what I was saying, then even in academic publishing, as with poetry, you will see that there are some of these pitfalls, some of the traps of digital technology. And this, this, I will sound a bit like a broken record when I say it, but I will. This is because technology is in the hands of the user, and it really depends on who is using it. You could do remarkable things with the technology that has been given to you, that is at your service, and many people around the world are doing it. So big shout out to them for doing the good work. But there are obviously a lot of people that are taking advantage of it, that are taking, especially within the Indian academia, that are taking advantage of some of these UGC norms. I won't go into the technicalities of it, because we're not only catering to an audience that comes from the Indian academia. But there are things that you need for promotions and casts, things like that, which has given birth to this predatory publishing culture, right? Where I can get an essay out in as little time as a week. It's unheard of. How can somebody get an essay out in a week? But people are doing that. So I think we need to be aware of it, and we need to try and avoid it. And that would be my suggestion.
Very well said, ma'am. Well, you already have answered the question that I was going to ask next, but still I'll ask that, because there's some physicality and materiality included in that question that I really, and I'm sure people who are listening to this would want to know. That as one of the rising authors, and in present age and time especially, we ask you to break it down for us, the mental process along with the physical and material exercise one must do to survive and succeed in creative writing, especially in the today's world, where potentially everyone, like you said, everyone more there are more writers than readers. So, and everyone has the means and mediums to be a published author. And also, as your position, as a female author, explore this for us, ma'am.
Um, you know, uh, for anybody who has ever asked me this question, how can I be a good writer? My answer is always and has always been the same. To be a good writer, any form of writing, whether that's creative writing, whether that's nonfiction, whether that's academic, you first have to be a good reader. That is the first and foremost exercise for your body and mind and soul that you can engage in, then that you must and have to engage in. as a writer. If you do not have the time to read, I'm sorry, you do not have the time to be a writer, a serious writer. It's one thing to be able to string sentences together. It's quite a different thing to call yourself a writer and take that role seriously. And again, you might call me highbrow for this, elitist for this. I'm not talking about the genre or the format or the kind of language you're using. I'm talking about the ideas that you bring to the table. I'm talking about the emotions that you share. And if you are giving me something that is hackneyed, that has been tried and tested, that is repetitive, if you're bringing me nothing that is new, if you're not, it doesn't even have to be avant garde. It just has to be different and new and authentic and your own. It has to be honest. And that is as far as the emotional space is concerned. As far as your practice is concerned, you have to read. You have to read everything you can lay your hands on. And that really, it's funny to me. When people are unable to understand this. So I try and bring in examples from the other arts. And I say, if you want to be a Bharatanatyam performer or a Kathak dancer, I've been learning Kathak for a couple of years now, you have to put in hours and hours and hours of practice before your Guruji will ever even allow you to be on that stage for a professional performance. If you want to be a yoga teacher, you have to go through a whole certification process. If you want to be a painter, you have to learn the basics of sketching and art and colors and canvas and material. It is a process. How then is writing not given the same amount of time and seriousness and patience and meditation that you would give to any of these other art forms? You wouldn't dare to go up on that stage and say, I am a Kathak dancer, until you've mastered some of the basics. For us as writers, reading is our practice. Reading is our meditation. Reading is our yoga. We have to keep doing this. More reading, less writing. By less, I don't mean, I'm not talking about it in terms of hours. I'm talking in terms of output. The amount you read always has to be greater than the amount you write. That is your food. That is your fodder. Along with that, because I found that word very, very interesting, physical. That is also something that we as writers often tend to ignore, because we live so much in our heads, and I've been guilty of that at one point in time. We live so much in our heads, cocooned in little sheltered spaces or rooms, that we forget to go out in the sun, that we forget to go out and touch some grass, that we forget to go out and look at the sky. I've often asked my students or friends this: when was the last time that you just stared at the sky? What was the color of the sky when you were coming to work today? Was it blue? Was it slate? Was it gray? There is no time for any of us, it seems, to stand and stare, as it goes proverbially. And also, really, where will you stare? Anytime you look up, there's just like a beehive of wires in modern urban spaces. Again, that aside, we tend to forget um, how important it is to take care of our bodies as well. How absolutely important it is to have some other form of engagement that is physical. Something else that I've started, um, you know, mm, and again, by physical, I don't mean like you have to be a professional athlete. You don't have to, uh, go and play some form of an active sport on a daily basis. But it would be great if you went for a walk on a daily basis, which too, besides keeping you healthy and fresh, be the source material for a lot of what you're eventually going to write. This character that you see that comes for a walk daily and sings a particular song and just keeps singing it in a loop. Or this woman that you see sitting um, on the terrace who looks down at you every time you cross that apartment. What is she wearing? What is her story? So you can find characters as well when you engage. And I understand that as writers, a lot of us are, we're very protective of our little space. We're protective of the bubble that we exist in. We're introverts by nature, reclusive lives. So I don't necessarily mean that you have to go out and become a social butterfly. Not that, but do go out. Mm, dig the soil with your nails. See how the earth feels. See how wet grass feels. See what it is like when you're walking on wet grass and the dew is still moist and still falling and it's still fresh. I think it's very, very important for us to keep that part of our bodies active and alive as well.
Your answer was too poetic. My has too many poetic lines in itself and full of imagery. I was imagining all those things. So it was amazing. My last question would be to you. We have 10 minutes left. So, on a slight comment on your translation work, ma'am, the impressive body of your early and later works with translation studies. We has a question as to what significance you assign to translation work for preserving regional identities, and how far the criticism that such efforts are another anglophonic attempt to homogenize communities, cultures, stand correct. Please share your critical insight on this.
Thank you so much for that question, Jaishree. Um, People who think this is just another attempt to homogenize regional voices, to homogenize diversity, to homogenize voices coming from the margins, another anglophonic attempt, are not translating the right way. So you're going to ask me, is there a right way and a wrong way to translate? Absolutely, yes. If you surrender to a register which is white, which subscribes to readers in the UK and the US, which you pick up books to translate that will necessarily get selected by these publishing circles, these small publishing circles, then I don't think you're translating it the right way. You're doing it with an agenda, and that is possibly when you're homogenizing your translations. Uh, to get to the question that you asked about how it helps with preserving regional voices and promoting regional voices, before that, I'd like to share how I completely disagree with the idea that things get lost in translation. As a translator, if I believed in that idea, I would never be able to translate. I do not see translation as a process of loss. I see translation as a process of gain. What do I mean by that? Is nothing lost, quote unquote, in translation? Of course. No two language systems are the same. If they were, they wouldn't be different languages. We wouldn't be speaking so many different tongues. We would go back to the Tower of Babel before our tongues split, and we would have all been speaking the same language. That is not the case. Languages have evolved and they have their own registers and their own grammars, and no two languages are the same, and therefore no two words can be, equal or identical. So when I'm translating, personally, I'm not looking to achieve any kind of equality. My translation is not equal to the source language text. My translation tries to capture the spirit, capture the meaning and the message or what was written in the source language text. I also shy away from using the word original because I think as writers, nothing truly is original like that. And this also helps into my belief system that nothing is lost in translation. Because if you were to think about it, the poem that I'm writing is also a process of loss, Because what is a poem? It is a translation of my thought into words. And I can, with utmost certainty, say that no poet has been able to write down exactly, precisely what she thinks about. There is always a gap between what you've conceived of and your written word. But I don't see that as a process of loss. I see it as a process of gain. So, translation for me then also is not about what I am losing through translation. It's about the fact that I would probably never have been able to read a Lev Tolstoy unless somebody translated it for me, or a Gabriel Garcia Marquez until somebody translated it for me. And their translations were so beautiful that when I was young, I did not even realize that I was reading something from the French or the Spanish or the Russian in English. I didn't even realize that this text had not originally been written in English. So I don't see it as a process of loss. It is a process of gaining access into worlds that I would not have had access to otherwise. And therefore, correctly done, done with the right intention, I think translation can truly help create a platform, not just for regional voices, but all marginal voices, because it helps to bring people out of their insular language islands on a platform where the language is shared. And so a Shanthal girl sitting somewhere in Purulia might one day be able to realize that a little girl sitting in a Nordic village is probably going through similar experiences. And this platform is created through translation, where we are able to get multitudes of voices and experiences together. And also, as a translator, I do not subscribe to the feeling or the idea that I am promoting somebody else's work, that I am, giving voice to somebody else. I do not have that kind of hubris or vanity. I am not giving voice to anybody else. People have their own voice, they are using it. I am only passing the microphone because I have one, because I have a platform which I can share with somebody else. I'm sharing that space. I'm not giving them a voice, I'm amplifying the voice that they already have. So, not recently, I think it's been a year already, maybe a couple of years pushing now, when I translated this work by, it was written in English, it was written in Bangla by Monohar Moli Bishash, Dalit writer from Bengal, um, about the Motua community and the Motua people and the Motua religion and philosophy. Um, I didn't think I was giving voice to them. Their voice was strong and powerful and already existed. I was only transferring that experience as best as I could, uh, to another group of readers who could not access this language before. Um, so, yes, it depends on what works you're picking, on which author you want to translate. You don't necessarily have to pass your mic just because you have it to everybody and anybody. You can pick and choose. You can decide, not only as the translator, but again, going back to what we were talking about before, as the reader whose story needs to travel beyond the margins of that language, whose story needs to be taken to a larger audience. Pass the microphone to that person. So done right and done with honesty and with the right intention, translation can, and I absolutely truly believe, is a form of social activism as well.
Oh, well, very well said, ma'am. And I'm happy that I used all my time that I was given. to ask
Yeah,
you questions, and as much as I could get from you. So I'm very happy for the fact. So, and thank you for beautifully answering all these questions, ma'am. And of course, the queries can never end, of course. And from a person who is already established, who is already in established academic fields and in creative writing as well, I can have endless questions, and our audience can have endless questions. But unfortunately, we have to wrap this up now. With that, we come to the end of tonight's discussion. I think each like what you shared, your knowledge, your insights, and it was truly valuable, ma'am. And I'm quite sure that our audience as well had similar experiences, thought provoking and much engaging session they had. And we are grateful to you that you took out time from your very busy schedule. We know that, and from for being part of this discussion, ma'am. And I'm sure it will prove to be a significant stepping stone in our efforts to build the discourse around this subject as well. So it was an absolute pleasure to have you with us in this evening, and thank you so much, ma'am.
thank you so much, Ashley. I just hope this is like, these conversations, they never end. This is just the beginning of it. And I hope that's how our audience that has either joined us now on our TMYS social media or will be watching this later. I
Yes,
hope
ma'am.
for everyone, this is the starting point of a conversation, not the end of
Yes,
it.
ma'am. We opt for the same one. And this is to remind everyone that we are calling for submission on working women in literature. The details are which can be viewed on www.tellmeyourstory.biz. With that, I bid everyone good night, and good night to you, ma'am. Thank you so much once again. Bye, ma'am.